Rounds of snow and ice on the way for millions over the next week, all really starting today and then cranking up as we continue on through the middle of February. Welcome in, everybody. My name's Gerald. I'm a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And if you haven't already, go ahead, like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell for the latest notifications. It's a great way to stay up to date as we continue what has been a crazy year so far, from historic Gulf Coast snow to now just a train of winter weather. Heck, we started the year with a tornado in California. We've had earthquakes. We've really done it all so far in 2025. So again, you're definitely going to want to stay up to date. Also comment, let me know where you're watching from and what you're seeing out there. It's always great to kind of hear those reports and see how the forecast is verifying, as we do have a very active day ahead. Alrighty, folks, with that said, let's dive on into the data and start talking weather. And starting off with our infrared satellite loop, it's not super exciting looking right now, to be honest. However, this doesn't really tell the whole picture right now, I don't think, but you will notice kind of this area of some enhanced cloud cover over Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. That's the start of our storm system, and it's really going to begin to crank up this afternoon and evening. So if you come back tonight, I'll probably be live this evening. Whenever we look at satellite then, it'll be a much different look, I think, compared to right now. But definitely seeing the beginnings of our storm today starting to kind of fire up here over the northern tier of the country. And if you can't see it very well on satellite, well, I'll tell you, radar imagery is doing quite a good job at showing it for us. So now let's go ahead and zoom on into some of this active weather. Starting up here into the northern plains and into the Midwest, we've got snow through the Twin Cities, near Washua, Green Bay, getting in on some of that snow, the UP of Michigan. And later on today, all of this is going to move eastbound into the thumb of Michigan, or the mitten, depending on what you want to call it. And then eventually tonight into the Northeast. And that's where we could see double-digit snowfall out of this storm system. And speaking of the Northeast, just south of you in the mid-Atlantic, we've got an absolute icy mess here into the DMV, into Northern Virginia, portions of West Virginia. You see these pinks and these purples and these blues. Yeah, that's that wintry weather and kind of just a mixed bag of it, creating very icy conditions. So not a day you want to be driving in this area, and to places like Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, into the DC area, Baltimore, eventually later this afternoon and evening, moving up towards the Philadelphia area through New Jersey. Just a real nightmare travel kind of day here with these very cold temperatures, leading to that snow and ice as that warm air above it kind of rides over that dense cold air at the surface. Now, south of there from the Carolinas through Kentucky, kind of just some showers here. Not a whole lot going on, but again, you can see our front. I bet you it's going to basically develop right here, and here's the start of the warm front associated with it. That's creating that lift that is leading to this precipitation. So you don't always need to kind of get the special maps that show the L's on the H to know where things are. You kind of already see it beginning to unfold here on our radar imagery. Now, current alert today, yeah, the map is filled in a lot compared to yesterday, hasn't it? Newly issued winter storm warnings for basically the entire state of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, including the Hudson Valley of New York there into southern Vermont, New Hampshire, and then even the extreme southern tip of Maine in on that winter storm warning. And again, folks, this is the Northeast, so it takes a little bit more to get a winter storm warning here compared to, Alabama, for example, where it may only take a couple inches of snow or ice. Normally it takes about half a foot or so up in these areas, and that's what we're going to get, a half a foot plus in those pink areas. And then the purple areas, winter weather advisories extending all the way down into northern Virginia, into portions of the northern Delmarva here, all the way back into northern Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then up through the Northeast. Yeah, it's going to be a very active day in really all these shaded areas. And then you'll also notice a very small area here back near the Alleghenies. Those are ice storm warnings and kind of those darker purple colors where we're going to get pretty extreme amount of ice to accrete, potentially more than 1/4 of an inch up to 1/2 inch of ice. That's more than enough to cause big issues. And then these gray boxes you see, these are dense fog advisories. It has been a very foggy start to February for many folks in the deep south, at least during the morning hours. Including areas like New Orleans, where we have the Super Bowl tomorrow, back through Florida, southern Georgia, and even down into the low country of South Carolina, seeing some of that dense fog on this Saturday. All right, let's go ahead and start breaking down model guidance for our current storm system. We'll start up in the Midwest, then we'll move to the Northeast, then we'll take a look at totals of snow and ice, and then we'll follow that up by taking a look at our next storm system next week, or really next storm systems is probably a better way to word it. All right, so here we go. This is kind of what we're seeing out there right now. I'll move it ahead. This is about 10 a.m. or so Eastern time, so about 9 a.m. back out into the Midwest. So if you're watching this video as soon as it gets published, this is basically where we're at. Now, as we go throughout the rest of this morning and into the afternoon, notice a real wintry mess, including Chicago, northern Indiana there through Ohio. You see these pink and these purple colors, that's ice, and that's something we need to watch. In fact, I would say this has uptrended a little bit on our models. It looks a little icier than maybe it did yesterday down that way. And then still a nice little snowstorm up through Michigan and into Wisconsin, like we've been discussing. Could see areas get near half a foot of snow up into those regions. So overall, just a real wintry mess. Now, if you're down south into southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, back down towards Kentucky, this storm not going to produce really any winter weather, I don't think. You may get some very brief freezing drizzle or sleet to start the storm, but should be all rain by this afternoon pretty quickly as that warm air really takes over the cold air at the surface. Now, we'll keep on going ahead into time here. This is getting into the evening hours. This is about 6, 7 p.m. tonight. Still snowing good up into the mitten of Michigan there. We've got some leftover snow in the UP and into Wisconsin there along the eastern shores of the state, and maybe even a little bit of light snow in the Chicago area, but an all-out ice event into northern Ohio, getting up near the Cleveland area, and then some leftover freezing rain into northern Indiana by this evening. And then we get to the overnight, folks. This is about midnight, 1 a.m. I think still some leftover light kind of snow through Michigan, and then we'll watch maybe some lake effect here off of Lake Michigan itself. Could get down into Indiana, maybe even into the Chicago area. It'll really depend on kind of how the wind is flowing across the lakes here. Obviously, a small little change in wind direction has pretty big impacts on the trajectory of these snow squalls, but it does look like a little bit of lake effect overnight tonight. Then we get into tomorrow morning and the storm is gone, just lake effect in general through the UP left over, and that could last throughout Sunday afternoon. You can see that lake effect on your map there all the way into Monday morning, pictured below. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to an area that's going to be very active with this storm. That's the Northeast. And we'll start again right at about 10, 11 a.m. this morning. So it's really going to be what we're dealing with right now that I showed you on radar, that kind of wintry mess down here into the DMV, into portions of the Delmarva. Again, you do not want to travel in those icy, wintry mixed conditions. And arguably, it's already overperforming down there on radar compared to the latest run of our high-resolution rapid refresh model that I'm using to show you kind of the evolution of the storm. All right, so we're all quiet into New England and through much of the Northeast right now. We'll go through this afternoon, though. Here we go. This is about 5 p.m. into the evening. This is when things really go downhill. You can see on the kind of eastern side of the apps here into the Alleghenies, we've got an ice storm unfolding. That's where we have those ice storm warnings. Could be all rain in Pittsburgh, or kind of due to the elevation and kind of the topography here, that warm air is going to get to you a little bit easier than on the other side of the mountains here, where we've got this ice and snow unfolding. So again, watching this kind of circled area for a big icing potential there into kind of the mountains of central and southern Pennsylvania. Need to watch that again. Do not travel if you don't have to. Today's not the day to do it. And then you can already see at this point by 5 p.m. Conditions really go downhill into Philadelphia, back through much of New Jersey, even starting to get up north towards Scranton, northern New Jersey, close to the boroughs of New York City there by this evening, right after sunset, maybe a little bit after sunset. Sunset's a little sooner for you folks in the Northeast than where I'm at in the Southeast, but either way, conditions really going downhill. Now, Philadelphia, areas in and around Philadelphia, it's going to be one of those storms where it could start as a very brief kind of burst of snow, but I think it changes over to ice pretty quickly. You can see here by 9 p.m., much of the Northeast now getting in on the fun. New York City, moderate snowfall. Northern Jersey, moderate snowfall. Hudson Valley getting in on the snow. Eventually Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts by about 8, 9 o'clock tonight. And still an ice storm just ravaging is maybe a bit of a tough word, but causing big problems back down into southern Pennsylvania. And that ice line is going to move north. Look at what happens as we go through 11 p.m. Remember, here's our low pressure system. Here's our warm front situated right into here, kind of right through that trough. And I won't get too much in the meteorology. You know what, actually, well, it's what this channel is about. So basically, you're going to see how the isobars do this right here. This kind of jutting out of the isobars, that's where your warm front is. Meteorology 101, all fronts lie in troughs. So that's where our warm front would be. Our cold front would be kind of back down into this trough right through Tennessee. So that's kind of the overall structure of the storm here. And the importance of that is on the warmer side of the warm front here in our warm sector, sector, that's where that snow could change to sleet or freezing rain. And you can see that happening in Philadelphia, State College, Harrisburg, even getting into central New Jersey, and eventually overnight tonight, unfortunately for snow lovers, probably going to make it all the way up to New York City. This is about the midnight hour. We're still holding on to all snow in Boston. Back through Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, areas like that, still all snow at this point, but that ice line now creeping up to Long Island, getting really much of the island, even back over towards Montauk, probably changing over to some ice at some point. When I say ice, it may be sleet instead of freezing rain. It could be a wintry mix, a mixed bag of precipitation here, but that's kind of what happens. And then the question mark is, at what point does the low pressure begin to phase? What I mean by that is you see right here, here's low pressure sitting right over Pennsylvania. If it were to keep tracking inland, then everyone would run into ice concerns, but that's not the forecast. The forecast is for this low pressure to kind of die out over the Appalachia chain right here and a new low pressure to form. In fact, you can already see this closed isobar beginning here along our favorable baroclinic zone. Basically, we talk about this all the time on the channel. It's an area where cold air and warm air are clashing, and that's where low pressure likes to form, and that's what's expected to happen. And this new low pressure then is going to slide on out to sea, and that's why we should get a pretty good snowstorm up here through Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, southern Vermont, New Hampshire. As we move this ahead, you'll kind of see how that happens here. The first low pressure dies and the new one forms. Now, the problem here is the model here is doing it a little bit later than maybe it was a day or two ago, just the models in general. And the side effect you get from that is our ice line gets a little bit further north. So the latest run here gets that freezing rain and sleet line all the way through Connecticut, Rhode Island, and into kind of the Massachusetts state line here. And if that happens, that would cut down on your totals into Connecticut and Rhode Island and basically the areas I just mentioned. Now, is that a guarantee to happen? No, it's not a guarantee. And remember, it's kind of unfortunate this is such a highly populated area that only about 100 miles or so in a north or south gradient with that ice line is going to make a huge difference in who gets a lot of snow and who gets kind of an ice mix towards the end. Now, either way, on the front end of this thing, we're going to be thumping snow through much of New England. And if you're up in Vermont, New Hampshire, Boston points north into Maine, I wouldn't worry about the ice line at all. But Connecticut, Rhode Island, back towards the Cape, that's where we could see some problems there with mixing. And that gets us to tomorrow morning as the storm pulling away should at least end again as a brief period of snow before we're all done Sunday afternoon. And then Sunday evening, even a little bit of a clipper, it looks like, tries to work through with some snow squalls back through the interior. This would be overnight Sunday, kind of as the Super Bowl is going on, and then into Monday morning. So that's what the storm looks like up here. Now, what does this mean exactly? Is this going to, produce a lot of snow, a lot of ice, where you're at? Well, that's obviously what you care about. Here's the latest forecast from the National Weather Service. Now, this was from 6 a.m. Central Time this morning. So anything that has fallen from the sky from 6 a.m. to whenever you're watching this, subtract that from these totals. But overall, still expecting around half a foot in this corridor of northern Michigan, back into northeastern Wisconsin, and then lighter totals back towards Detroit. Could see a couple of inches, maybe more like an inch or two when I say a couple of inches, not 3 or 4 inches. And then you notice really no snow down south in Chicago, Indiana, Ohio. And the reason for that is the next map. It's this one, the ice concern. And again, this is uptrended a little bit, especially if you're watching in northern Ohio. Latest forecast calls for 1/10 of an inch up to 1/4 of an inch of ice. That's going to make travel basically impossible. Could even lead to a couple of power outage concerns. So that's what we'll need to watch for. In here, it looks like more of a glaze to 1/10 of an inch back into Chicago and northwestern Indiana. So less concerns there. Still don't want to travel on that though. But really kind of growing in concern here for northern Ohio, where we could see a prolonged period of icing that we will need to watch out for. Not a whole lot back towards Iowa. And then again, the southern half of these states going to be all rain. If anything falls from the sky today, which probably will for most of you. Just good old-fashioned rain, though. No ice expected there. Now, we move the ice concern eastbound, and this is where we're really concerned for travel and power outages. Look at the Alleghenies here. We're talking 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice. That's impossible travel, and that is scattered to widespread power outages. Especially the other problem is our low pressure is going to basically track right over you. So the wind's going to really be whipping around. That combined with those icy trees, yeah, you don't want that at all in this area. So, be prepared for that. Obviously, it's a little too late to go out and about to change anything or get anything, but hopefully you've already done that before today. And most people up here generally prepared for winter weather and have some sort of reserve or, stockpile of whatever you need for a winter storm. Now, further east from there towards Philadelphia, Baltimore, D.C., also an icy event. And I'll tell you, I would go ahead and up these totals a little bit further south where we're already getting some ice to overperform. And in general, I would say this is going to be more of a 1/10 of an inch to a 1/4 of an inch event in this circled area. Maybe let me redraw that circle just a little bit. Let's see here. Maybe we'll do it right down like that. There we go. So in here, I would say a 1/10 of an inch to a 1/4 of an inch. I know that's a little bit higher than these totals. I think the storm's overperforming a little bit in the ice department already. So just go ahead and nowcast that, prepare for it. Again, that would be near impossible travel and some scattered power outages. Probably not widespread with those totals, but enough that it will cause some problems. And obviously the Super Bowl's tomorrow. A lot of Eagles fans in here. So you don't want to see that by any means. But hopefully, we can hold on to the power. We can deal with the roadways by just not going out for a little while. But obviously power outages is when things become a little bit more impactful. Now, what about snow? Overnight tonight and really starting this evening through tomorrow. This is straight from the NWS, folks. A big corridor here of 1/2 foot to about 10 inches of snow through New York State, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, southern Vermont, New Hampshire. I'll go ahead and draw a circle within the circle here. If there's someone that might get kind of robbed a little bit, if you will, I'm watching right into here. If that ice line gets a little bit further north than it should, then these 1/2 foot totals could be more like 3 to 4 inches. We'll watch it. It's not a guarantee. Another thing I'll add is I do think whoever's right, I guess, to the north of that ice line. So in this case, if the ice line gets there, it would probably be right in here from Boston back into Western Mass, southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire. Somewhere in here could get 10 to 12 inches. I think whoever's just north again of that transition zone going to have the most lift from the warm front combined with the cold air. We could get, double-digit snowfall, not out of the question, especially in the higher terrains here of Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. Would not be surprised at all to see that. But just in general, if you're in that kind of black area that I have drawn, looks like about 1/2 foot plus of snow. The blue area could see even more than that, maybe double digit. And then if you're in that yellow area, that's kind of we're watching an uncertainty zone where you could see maybe a little less than that should ice cause problems. Now you go south of there into New York City. I still feel pretty good about a 3 to 5 inch event. Starting as a good amount of snow. We'll say 2 to 4. How about 2 to 4 instead of 3 to 5? Because I think you'll probably get to 3 or 4 inches, maybe even 5 inches. Then by the time the ice comes in, it's going to compact it down. And I know whenever you hear how much snow you're going to get, you're thinking by the time it's all said and done. So, after the ice compacts a little bit, probably going to be 2 to 4 inches in there. Philadelphia, around an inch or so, I think is a pretty safe forecast for you. Again, probably starting as snow, then sleet, and that'll kind of count as snow and freezing rain. So around an inch, a little less, a little more, depending on where you are, obviously, in the city. All right. So that took quite some time, took about 18 minutes, but now let's go ahead and start talking about next week. I'm going to go a little less in depth with this storm just because, it's a little bit further away. And also after today, we can really start talking about this one more in depth. We'll be done with the current storm and we'll do the same process we did for the storm we just talked about for next week as we get into tomorrow. But here's the setup, basically. So areas further south are going to get in on the winter action. Also areas further west. So this next storm could impact areas all the way into Kansas, Missouri, maybe Oklahoma, back down into Virginia. Portions of North Carolina, not out of the question, could see winter weather with this one. The reason is, well, here's our piece of energy. It's this big trough you see back down near California, kind of swinging on through the lower 48. And obviously, it's going to take a further south track than the last storm. And just look at all of this lift ahead of it. You can see this very well-defined corridor of enhanced lift. That's where we're going to get a lot of precipitation and something that's not being talked a lot about. Due to the fact that we're going to get a big winter storm out of it, we could see some real flooding concerns down deep south. Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, specifically kind of the northern half of those states, maybe even into Tennessee. We're going to get round after round after round of rainfall out of this event. And those areas could get 1/2 foot to a foot of rain next week, or maybe we'll say over the next 10 days in general with this pattern. That's going to cause problems. We'll need to watch it. But then to the north, it's going to be all kind of snow and ice to worry about through the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast. So there's wave one. And then we get to next Wednesday and kind of next Thursday time frame. Again, that's the first wave out here. Behind it, another impressive trough developing, kind of multiple troughs, just a whole lot of spin and a whole lot of lift out west. This also going to get ejected eastbound. And this is going to be what I'm going to refer to as the Valentine's Day storm, which, again, will probably work through the Northeast and the East in general by next Thursday, Friday, which would be just in time for Valentine's Day. And you can see it here. This is the morning of the 14th, next Friday. Just a whole lot of lift, impressive trough swinging on through. So that's the setup for this. Let's go ahead and show you what it could look like on radar. Here's the latest GFS. We'll go ahead and move this ahead into time. There we go. This is Monday evening. A nice shield of snow breaking out from Kansas to Missouri through the Ohio Valley. You can see that blue there. And then to the south, this is where we could see that flooding threat. By the way, I think I mentioned this is the GFS model. I'll show you the European next. But this is going to be enough potentially to drop a good amount of snow for a lot of people. I mean, you go from Kansas to West Virginia, you could drive the whole length without getting out of the snow shield. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of people that see it then. And then I think the real winners from this one going to be in places like Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C. And I'll go ahead and warn you now, the screen's going to get a little bit crazy here. So close your eyes if you don't like flashing lights, I guess, or if you're epileptic or something. Epileptic, excuse me. So let me just back up the map a little bit so we can look at the trend here. All right. Yeah, that should be good enough. So here's the trend on the GFS, and this is why I said North Carolina could not be completely out of it here. So this is, a run from a couple days ago, newer run, and then these were just newer and newer and newer. If you notice the trend here, again, this is a couple runs ago, it's getting a little further south. So if you're watching in Greensboro, High Point, or Danville, areas like that, this could be getting a little bit more wintry looking for you. And we're watching that here on the models. Again, this would be Tuesday morning. You can see right above me, 7 a.m., February 11th. A nice shield of snow here and shifting a little bit further south in the models. So we'll watch it. Could that get as far south as North Carolina? Not out of the question. It's very possible. So we'll continue watching the trends on that. But Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky looks very snowy Monday into Tuesday. And then through Tuesday afternoon, I mean, what a beautiful winter storm on this model for Virginia, West Virginia, into the Delmarva. Looking at the storm cranking up here now a little bit further south. Again, also has ramifications for the Northeast, downstream here. Philadelphia, New Jersey, Long Island, coastal areas in the Northeast. What looked like maybe a little bit more snow for you a couple days ago, shifting south. This would be more snow now for the Delmarva into Charlottesville. Delaware, the southern Jersey Shore maybe, down again into the Danville area potentially if it keeps shifting south. So that is also something to note with this trend. And then, I mean, just talk about brutal conditions if you're a winter weather fan in South Carolina, the Charlotte area. Can't really win in some places, it feels like. And I know my folks in the Northeast are saying, what are you talking about? The Carolinas just got a ton of snow. Well, I'm going to go ahead and draw a little circle here. Right in this area really has not gotten much this winter at all. We've gotten about an inch or less. The coast got a bunch of snow. The mountains got a bunch of snow from one storm, or excuse me, maybe not a bunch of snow, but they got snow. Either way, we're kind of running a little bit of a deficit in this region. So can we fill that? Stay till the end of the video. I'll throw you a little bone down that way. But either way, just a cold rain in that region with this storm. And then here comes the next storm by Wednesday. Some of the same areas, Kansas, Missouri, up into the Midwest. Another cold air damming signature. So watching for ice by next Wednesday, Thursday. Into the foothills of North Carolina, Virginia. We've got snow back up into the Midwest. Again, just a big old mess. We're going to start breezing through this a little bit quicker now as we get further ahead into time. This one, a little bit more of an inland cutter. So this would be more of a interior northeast storm by Thursday afternoon. And then we get into Valentine's Day, and here's another one. So this right here is what I'm calling the Valentine's Day storm. It's like a day before Valentine's Day. So maybe not the best name, but we'll just call it the Valentine Storm instead. How about that? You can see that move on through, and then another wave, and then guess what? The pattern doesn't end. A whole another storm by about a week or so from now. So the pattern is loaded. That's the GFS. What about the European? Again, we'll go a little bit slower for the start of the run here. A little less snow into Kansas, Missouri on this run. Still shows a good amount of snow into Virginia, West Virginia. And you can see that holding on here, less snow further south. So again, not quite getting to North Carolina on the European run. And then this kind of rides up the coast by early next week. And just in general, the first storm is a lot more lackluster on the European compared to the GFS. The European shows kind of just a small overrunning event. The GFS shows more of a major winter storm. But when I show you the ensembles, I think you'll get the idea that I think the GFS might be actually a little bit closer to reality for once compared to the European. I know, who would have thought? So obviously we'll watch the trends. Then here comes the Valentine's storm, I guess we'll call it. This is Wednesday afternoon. Big snow out into the plains, moves up into the Midwest, into the Great Lakes, and then just a wintry mess into the Northeast by Thursday. Again, the day right before Valentine's Day, and just kind of tracks all the way through until Friday morning. Things calm down a little bit until they don't. A whole nother storm system again by next weekend. So I told you this was going to be a never-ending pattern, and that's kind of what it's looking like here on the models. All right, let's talk about ensembles a little bit. How much snow could we get next week? Well, this is snow within a 24-hour period. I'll start with the GFS ensembles because, again, I think the operational run's doing pretty good. Here we go, that Monday into Tuesday time frame. Nice little storm here. A good signal over portions of Missouri, eastern Kansas, and then stretching all the way into the mid-Atlantic. Just to give you an idea of some of these totals, it's around, I guess, about a 4-inch mean or so here over Missouri. We're getting towards half a foot mean over central Virginia. And you can see that really beef up over central Virginia as we get into Wednesday. Again, a nice signal for snow, and then into the Delmarva. Philadelphia, southern New Jersey, you're in the kind of play here as well. A little too far north into New York City, Boston, into the interior. But you get back down again into the mid-Atlantic. For once in your life, this could be your storm instead of someone to the north of you or to the south of you. So obviously pulling for our snow lovers up that way. And then here comes the second signal for the Valentine's storm. Again, a big signal back into Kansas, Missouri, rides up through the Midwest. Michigan could get big snow out of that one. Maybe Chicago could finally get decent snow. We'll see. Mean of about 4 inches on this, and then gets on into the interior Northeast. Looks more likely compared to the I-95 by the kind of Thursday, Friday timeframe of next week. And then comes another storm during the weekend and into the start of the following week. So it's, again, a loaded pattern. That's the GFS. What about the European? Pretty similar, honestly, folks. Here's the first storm. Here's Monday, Tuesday, and I just realized I'm going to have to switch this back to 0Z so we can actually go all the way out into time. So again, here's the first storm signal. Pretty similar to the GFS, honestly, a little further north. So it looks better for Philadelphia, New Jersey, Long Island, and kind of the coast of the Northeast. But really, they're not far off in terms of totals. Again, about 3 to 6, 7 inches kind of is the mean here over Virginia. And then you get into the second storm system by the latter part of next work week. It's kind of the same thing as the GFS. And then that third storm signal by about a week to 10 days out from now. All right, what about ice? How about ice? Let's again go back to 0Z so we can go all the way out in time. Watching that ice signal for the storm on Monday, Tuesday, a pretty good signal into the foothills and mountains of Virginia, West Virginia, even down into North Carolina, Boone, Asheville. We'll need to watch for ice in those areas. And then it comes later next week, a pretty big ice signal again for the Northeast, the Ohio Valley. And then that next signal, ice signal, getting all the way down again into the Carolinas. So we'll see. To be fair, the storm that's happening on Monday looked like it could be an icy mess for the Carolinas and didn't end up, or it doesn't look like it's so much now, at least for South Carolina. Now, North Carolina, again, watching it. But we'll watch the trends here. We'll see how strong that cold air damming gets. Either way, though, just shows you a very active pattern from snow and ice. All right, final thing I'll talk about here. I'll throw a little bone to my friends down south who are, maybe wondering if they've got another shot at snow this year. Well, here's the pattern later on going further out in the time. So this is by, again, next Thursday or Friday. So that kind of Valentine's storm time frame, we've got just this big pocket of cold air. It's just trapped over North America, but it's trapped a little bit further west and over the central part of the continent. And you can see at the same time, the southeast ridge is just continuing to hold on for dear life. That's why we've had this kind of spring fever-like pattern for many of us in that region. Now, there are signs of change that will go further ahead into time. Obviously, right here at Southeast Ridge, really flexing its muscles by next Friday. That's why that storm's going to cut inland for, again, later next week. And then comes that weekend storm, and I think with that one, that's going to usher in cooler air, and this is a much more favorable looking pattern for cold and snow. Cold at the very least. Snow, obviously harder to get, but we'll at least have cold at this point now parked over the east in about 10 days or so. Could this produce snow in the south? It could. In fact, some of the models like the GFS have a little something around the 10-day time frame. It's way out there though, and I'm not going to get into details, obviously. Heck, this video's already gone 30 minutes just talking about the next week for the weather. So we'll save that for them. But just to give you an idea, pattern does look to get a little bit better towards the middle of the month. And I kind of mentioned that really starting at the beginning of the month. I said towards the middle of the month, it would get better for the southeast. The first half of the month, though, looked pretty good for the northeast. And that's kind of what's happening here. And then as we move this ahead, it looks to stay, somewhat active. Heck, even we get later on towards the 22nd, that MJO phase you hear so much about in the community, which maybe I'll kind of put a whole video to that one day. But looks even all right around the 22nd for snow in the east. So active month, not slowing down. What about temperatures? Final map I'll show you. Spring fever ongoing still this weekend into the deep south. But by the time we get to next week, obviously that cooler air sinking further south, spring fever is going to get put on hold for a while as we deal with this colder air. You can see it kind of trying to fight back, and then notice this is that cold air damming signal. So it could just be a raw rain for many of us into the upstate of South Carolina, the Charlotte area. Could be or will be snow or ice likely into Virginia, North Carolina. So good old-fashioned cold air damming doing its thing here in February. And then later on ahead into time, I'll just go ahead and skip ahead a while. And, I just realized, again, I need to go to the 0Z model. Sorry about that. We'll keep on skipping ahead into time here, though, and eventually here comes the blue by the middle of the month, and that's when I think everyone gets in on this more Arctic-like air mass into the eastern U.S., or at least polar air mass, and then you can see that kind of hangs on for a while. So that's what we're seeing right now. Again, just a crazy pattern, crazy active. 2025 has not really slowed down. I think we had like 1 week of quiet weather, and then we went right back to this, so it's been quite the ride. But with that said, again, if y'all did enjoy the video and you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for the latest notifications. Again, I'll probably be live tonight at some point. I'll get an exact time. I do have a couple of plans I have to go work through and some homework to get done today, but it should be good to go tonight. Then we'll have, hypothetically, a video tomorrow morning. And just to give you a heads up, probably won't have a video Monday morning. In fact, I can guarantee you I won't have a video Monday morning, but I will during the afternoon or the evening. So I won't go a day without an update, but I will miss a morning time slot on Monday. Alrighty, folks, y'all have a great one. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you all next time.